Welcome to the Spiritual Forum, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. I want to give a big shout out to our donors, which I've been doing recently. So today I'd like to recognize Mark. Mark was a guest on the Spiritual Forum podcast and he donated afterwards. I'm just really grateful for his support of the podcast and anybody else out there who's listening. You can support the podcast by listening, rating, reviewing, donating, sharing, all that good stuff to keep this voice of hope and awakening and inspiration on the planet alive. I also want to remind you of the Whole Planet Spirituality Retreat that I am leading October 19th through 22nd at Unity Village in Missouri. You can read all about that at thespiritualforum.org/retreat. And if you want to get regular updates about the retreat and what's going on and who's presenting and all that, you can sign up on that page as well. I've been sending out weekly newsletters for anybody who's interested in the retreat. All right, that's about it. Let me introduce my guest. Okay. Maré Hieronimus is a return guest on the Spiritual Forum podcast. My first episode with her was number 170, The Choice Between Two Paths, Nature or Transhumanism. That was almost exactly a year ago. I really enjoy having conversations with Maré because she's willing to discuss the realities that we're facing in today's world. And she brings a deeply grounded spiritual perspective to so many important topics. As background, Maré had an unconventional upbringing on a commune in Maryland, where she spent her childhood surrounded by mystical teachings, a reverence for the earth, and a love for dance. An artist and a dancer by training, she'd successfully kept traditional societal roles and values at arm's length, instead listening to the call of her soul to live a creative life. She's a mother, a dancer, a teacher, and an author. Her books are Path to Remembrance, Vision for a New Earth, Systems of Indoctrination, and the Wild Rose of the Soul, and Majesty of the Wild, Writings on Freedom. I'm sure that just kind of scrapes the surface of you, Maré, but welcome. Really happy to have you again.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back. I so enjoyed our conversation last year and everything that it kind of brought to the forefront. And I'm looking forward to diving in again with you and talking about where we are today.
Yeah, me too. It was really interesting that I just noticed today it's been almost exactly to the date, plus or minus a couple of days, a year. And like I mentioned in the introduction, I love finding people who are bold enough to talk about like what's really happening on the planet right now and also have a spiritual lens because there's a lot of people out there talking about what's going on, but they're kind of missing that spiritual grounding. And there's a lot of people out there, with the spiritual, but they're kind of not able to see, some of the realities that I know I can't see all of them, but the ones that keep showing themselves, it's like, wow, this is where we are. And it's a very pivotal time to be on the planet, as we discussed last year. I kind of be interested in what do you think? Where do you think we are relative to a year ago when we were talking about transhumanism or nature, those two paths?
Yeah, it's interesting speaking about these things because as we're moving forward, what I'm noticing is that everything that we've been talking about is really coming to pass. And it almost feels like when I think about a year ago, I felt like we were tiptoeing around some things that it's hard for people perhaps to uh, conceptualize the fact that we're on this cusp. But really, from last year to this year, it has been laid out before us. And the conversations that we were having around two paths before us, nature versus the machine, the dawn of artificial intelligence, and transhumanism, you know, everything has come to pass and so much more. And we're really in a place where, um, we have to, I think, move to begin to speak about these things in really compassionate but very bold ways where we take hold of what's happening and begin to have conversations that are deeper than just the superficial layer and shine deeper light on what's really happening energetically as well from these deeper kind of spiritual perspectives. So I think so much of what we're really looking at in my perspective is the reemergence actually of the sacred feminine as a force. And as this is simultaneously happening, the attempted squashing of that in a very, very methodical, clear, profound way. Sort of misogyny so deep that it's really unbelievable to bear witness to. And what that has to do with transhumanism really is that, the divine feminine, she is that portal through the worlds. And she is nature's sort of like this incredible system that all women, natural born women, biological women, have, where we bring down souls into this world through our womb. And we move human beings into this planet. That's our, from a biological evolutionary perspective, what we've been doing. And so what I see is happening is really an attack on that natural process through transhumanism, the erasure of the high sacred feminine, and that which was exiled, put into exile thousands of years ago. And I don't see it as a men are evil, women are good kind of thing. I see that really what we're looking at is that the polarity has been out of balance. And this incredible imbalance has created what we are living through. The narcissistic belief that we can not only tamper with life, but that we can create life, that we are God. And that's really what we're looking at, this sort of psychological state of mind that many people have bought into, that we are now actually God.
And I think we should probably identify some of this because I do know that some people still are like, "What are we talking about?" And I do think that this "we are gods," it's in medicalization. It's in that your body is insufficient as it is, but we can help that. We can help all of your processes through all of our medicines and all of our injections and all of our surgeries and
Agreed.
everything that we can modify whatever you want, that we can create that. I think
Yes.
that's where a lot of the we are
Womb,
God is.
artificial wombs also. I mean, we are on the brink of this sort of, I mean, this is the movement into a whole new psychology and mythical structure that they're trying to create for us. And some people are taking it and saying, yeah, I want to have a surgery and modify my body, and I can play God and shift my DNA, and, and other people are saying, wait a second, I don't want to do that. And I don't want to take that path. So,
Yeah, I want to put that on the side for a second because when you mentioned artificial wombs, that's terrifying to me. I mean, when I see images of artificial wombs, and they've been in futuristic movies. I know that's preparing us for with predictive programming, but the idea, I think back about how the baby was taken from the breast in the 60s. I was one of those babies where mothers were convinced that, oh gosh, you don't want to breastfeed, you want to be free from all of that. And so we have this glass bottle that will free you up so you can do what you want and somebody else can feed the baby. That was one of the first steps towards the artificial womb, taking the baby away from the mother. And I know in
yes.
our last episode, I think we talked about medicalized births. I'm not sure, but that's kind of on the forefront of my mind too. But taking birth away from the home and the family and the mothers and the divine feminine and the women and the aunts and everybody surrounding and the chanting and just making it a sacred event and putting it into a medicalized, sterilized system. I think that's another step towards it. And then now with all this stuff about we can do what we want with your bodies, it's going to, you don't even have to be pregnant. Pregnancy is kind of a hassle, isn't it? I mean, you want to be free from that too. And I think people will buy into that. I don't know that everybody will, obviously, but some people will go, you know what? I mean, like I was at a wedding 2 nights ago, and I was surprised at conversations I had with young women about how concerned they are about pregnancy and giving birth and all these horror stories they heard. And it's like, wow, I don't remember ever being surrounded by horror stories about birth. But I think this new generation is. That may just
Mm.
be a limited amount of data of the people I'm exposed to, but I hear that a lot. And anyway, I guess I'm just talking through the steps I've seen that we've gone through that's naturally leading to this birthing outside the womb. Do you see anything different or something that I haven't seen?
Absolutely. This is a longer term, as we understand, process that has been happening where we have been extracted from our wisdom lineages. And this is what I see as the deepest sort of concern. Because when we are extracted from these lineages, then we are sort of set adrift, in my feeling, or we are psycho-spiritually not allowed to anchor anywhere. And so, for sure, in my feeling, I see this process that has happened over decades and even centuries further back of taking away these lineages that have been passed down for millennia. And women have been the holder, just as we are the portal through which every human being enters the world. We have also been the holder of much sacred knowledge, from healing knowledge as well as ceremonial knowledge. And women have very special, I believe, very special natural capabilities that evolutionarily part of our development. The sort of the way that we have developed our sort of intuitive and uh, empathic capabilities because of the functions that we've played. And so the biology and our nature are intertwined. And that's what's such an interesting thing in this time is that we're watching people essentially try and extract our sacred biology from the natural evolutionary process. And with that extraction, they are obliterating these wisdom lineages which have kept us anchored for thousands of years. And so, and I see it very much, I think, as you do, as an agenda, as something that has been set upon us. But I always say with these kinds of things, it actually doesn't matter whether you believe people are trying to do this to us or not, whether you believe there is some kind of elite guard that is infusing propaganda into the media. Because when you look at what's happening, this is just what's happening. It's just what's happening. We have obliterated, we're no longer allowed to say that biology plays a sacred function in life. We have people denying biology, which I think is very significant because, in my view, as a woman, as a dancer, someone who has spent my life working with the body and its sacred nature. That is the umbrella of my work, the sacred body. The way that the body actually can be infused with the divine, that we are emanations from spirit, from the spirit world, that our biology is sacred, that our human form is sacred, and that people are sort of throwing around surgery. Surgery is a really big deal.
Mm-hmm,
I have
mm-hmm.
I have had surgery, and it can destroy you. And it is not something that is, it's not nothing. So I think what I'm saying is that it doesn't matter whether you believe there's an agenda that's happening or not. It's just happening before our very eyes, whether you believe it's intentional or not. Here
I
we
think that's a
are.
good point. Yeah.
These
I think that's a
words
really good
are
point because a lot of people just don't. Once you mention that there's some elite agenda, that a lot of people just write that off as conspiracy
Yeah.
theory, and you don't know that. Where are they? Who are they? I always get the "who
Right.
are they?" As if you have to actually see something to know that there's something behind it. I think we are where we are. We are creating this reality. We're participants in this reality. And in some way, our collective consciousness is agreeing to this reality that we are in. And we need to kind of be very aware, awake of these deeper meanings. I really think that what you said is when we're kind of splitting ourselves off from our nature, that we are set adrift. It's almost like the soul is outside the body or something. That we're set adrift, and when you're set adrift, I mean, I'm thinking in my own mind as I'm talking, well, how does that feel? Like if I was anchored and had some sort of solid footing, and suddenly I'm set adrift, whether I'm a kite or in a canoe, there's a sense of just kind of a complete loss of bearings, probably fear. You're looking outside to figure out where can I find an anchor, and if it's not that anchor, the divine anchor of the soul, you'll be looking for anchors out there in in society. You'll be looking for people to tell you what to do or
Yeah.
how to get to safety or how to feel that anchor again. And I think we're seeing that a lot too, that we're losing the divine anchor, which is a good anchor, because anchors can also have a bad connotation that you're anchored down and you can't move. I think we're talking more about just a solid foundation and the connection to that divine. And if you sever yourself from that and you're adrift, then anything goes, and it's a very, very unsettled, unsafe feeling.
Well, when you were just moving on that image of a kite, my feeling is that so many people, yes, they are disanchored, and it's like that string should be pulsing into us the wisdom that is our birthright. That each of us is actually personally able, through the divine instrument of the body, to tap into these wisdom lineages, to tap into the innate wisdom of the body, to tap into the what's floating through the ethers. That we have that capability, that's our natural born state. And when there's this sort of rupture where we are no longer tethered, where the soul is not fully embodied, how can we even begin to sense what's actually really happening? For example, when we look back into these last years, and those of us who felt very clearly that, whether you had information or not, that something is very wrong with these injections, that there is that that it just they didn't sit right. And I knew a few people that they didn't want to look into the information, but they just felt uneasy. And to me, that is the sort of intuitive wisdom that each of us has access to when we are connected, because our body is that instrument. And again, that kite image, the divine, that wisdom should be pulsing through us, through our breath, through our blood, through our bones. That's how it operates when we are healthy, when we are functioning. And we don't need an external tell me, is this injection going to be okay? We can sense a little deeper. And it was also amazing and really sad, actually, to watch so many people not feel that, even if they're not going to look into the injection, that something is wrong. Just the fact that they haven't gone through rigorous safety testing for years, you know and then there was no questioning allowed. No questioning allowed. And then those of us who said, wait a second, we need to question this. And I've looked at the research, I've looked at the data, and I know that they don't stop in, transmission. I know that it doesn't stop infection. And to say that, which is the reality, which was the truth, which was what the data showed us, and then for people to be enraged that I'm even saying that, that anyone who had the gall to say that, which was the truth. And so really, this is what we're looking at, is mass swaths of people just not able to connect into that intuitive experience that would have given them the information. This is dangerous. This is dangerous. Or at least have some caution around it.
Yeah, at least it's
And then even,
unknown. Yeah. At a minimum, it's unknown. I read the studies. I knew early on it didn't stop transmission and all that. If it, assuming all that virology stuff is true, I knew that all along, and I would say the same thing. And yeah, people would say I was crazy, but it's like I read it. It wasn't. I wasn't succumbing to some sort of theory. I read it. So this is really interesting. I think this is an interesting indication. That this cutoff from the divine cuts us off from our intuition. Like, people don't know that they have it. I think I have to admit myself, I don't have I have a good strong intuition about a lot of things, and other things I can look at other people. Possibly you might be somebody who is more deeply intuitive than I am, and I know that it's not about skill. I know that it's, about access and about being connected and embodied. I can sense that I could definitely have more intuition, access more intuition than I do now. And I can sense that I probably had more intuition as a child, maybe, than I did as I was conditioned through, all the patterning and everything that I learned from culture. And I can also see that some people are just 100% cut off, like they have no sense of an inner voice at all. So everything is listening to the experts. So what is our remedy then? What is our antidote? I think we can only do what we can do. Um, so what do you think?
mm-hmm. Well, I think going back to what I said before, uh, my sense is that what we're looking at is, a culmination of really thousands of years of imbalance.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
what is happening on a larger level is that as the imbalance becomes so extreme,
Please.
the truth becomes more and more clear,
Uh-huh.
because it's so far away from the reality that is being projected here and now. And I feel that this deep imbalance, which really is an imbalance of a polarity imbalance of, we say masculine and feminine, but really, it can be spoken about in so many different ways. Whether it's dark and light, or you know, uh, the seer and the seen, Shiva and Shakti, yin and yang, the left and the right, all of these different expressions. And this imbalance has moved to such an extreme that what we're seeing is the end game of that extreme. The end game of the extreme is moving completely away from the Divine Mother, allowing her to remain in exile, which isn't going to happen because she's coming back. That is what I feel, is that this is really the time of her return. That there are so many people awakening to the extraction of her, and that what we're seeing play out culturally is an end game of that extraction, is the movement into transhuman. We don't even need women anymore. We don't need
Mm.
women. We can use an artificial womb, and we can be a better woman. Made a man can be actually a better woman than a woman. is what the culture is saying, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But the remedy, again, is, I think, is in her great return, is through her understanding that as the transhuman world is being born, she is also being reborn, because we, so many can now see more and more, and I think it will only grow, that we're really moving into incredibly dangerous territory. And do you really want to be on that path? Do you really want to be on that path into the transhuman sort of untethering of man to nature, of the human being to nature? A lot of the studying that I've done is in the Vedic traditions, and she is nature. Nature is her in that tradition. It's it's everything, that she is the earth. She is the earth body. And we all, of course, have this in us, both male and female. We're all different makeups of this sacred polarity. The ingredients are, different in every human being, and it expresses itself differently in every human being, from these more ancient perspectives.
So you talk about the exile of the Divine Mother, and I'm thinking, the other ways that we are so out of balance with the masculine and feminine is the deforestation, the extinction of species, the way we treat animals, the way we put poison on all of our foods and plants, and those are other examples of this minimization of the feminine. It's kind of the same as the I am God. I can
Yeah.
form this earth, and I can decide who lives and who dies, and the death and destruction of all of these animals and species means nothing to me. I am God.
Yes.
So it's happening there as well as biologically with the body and science and medicine. So you think that we've created this imbalance in the masculine feminine polarity that's so great that, like, she's going to come back with a vengeance?
I don't know. I think it's yeah, sure. I'm sure I have a lot more Kali energy than I realized. She's the destroyer. But I also feel like now is the time of her return,
Uh-huh.
and that not only is it through that sort of destroyer archetype, but also through just the explosion of love and compassion that is
Mm-hmm.
really also our birthright, and is the highway into our natural ascension process. That is to say that the love that we all can experience in the heart, and that the Divine Mother is the great archetype. She is the one who sacrifices herself for the absolute love of her children. And that's that fierce love which every mother has, if it's buried, even if it's buried deep inside of them. There is some part of you when you have a child, when you give birth, and you feel that it's a love that is so profound that it is, a reflection of the highest form of love. So I feel that is also returning as well, as we bear witness, as we as mothers also bear witness to an attack on children that has never, I don't think, has ever been seen to this degree on the face of our planet, you know, in terms of putting children on highly destructive medications for life, whether it be the medicalization of their psychiatric state and these R's, which are wreaking havoc, and not to mention, putting children on hormone blockers or having surgery. Or of course you can also go down the route of the vaccines, and what many of the vaccines have brought to the forefront with this generation of children since 1987, when the floodgates were opened, and the government said, oh, we will no longer keep these companies liable for the damage. They were doing too much damage on children. And there were very few vaccines on the schedule then. And now we have, I think most recently I saw, if you include the new mRNA injections, which many people are, there's well over 100 vaccines now for children up until 18 years of age. And we have an epidemic happening of illness. People are, living in a toxic soup. And it's the vaccines are just one element. Our food supply, children are eating, glyphosate. The way that we have to guard ourselves these days from every, every avenue, whether it be from the water, the fluoride in the water, the food supply, you know, um, the baby formula, the drugs. So when we look at this great poisoning, really, when you really understand what's happening, when you look at the data, when you do the research, and you just feel in your gut, wow, what is happening? It's for those of us, who sense into that. There's a cry that you feel that's so deep inside of your body that this is just absolutely insane, that we are putting our children in harm's way to levels, degrees that we've never done before. And it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you position this as a war on children. And I think you also said this like a war on women or the feminine. I do want to point out, because it might be important for people to know that in terms of politics, I don't know where you are politically. I know I've left the left and the right. It's like they don't really mean much to me anymore.
Yeah.
There's something that kind of transcends all of that, like being human and being connected to humanity, and these wars that we have between left and the right seem very, very contrived and petty. But your background, I think it might be worth sharing a little bit about what your political background is, because I think a lot of people assume that people with this kind of perceptions of reality are crazy right wingers, and that is not you at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was a left wing. I was, considered myself progressive for many years, and I agree. The political field is really troubling. But I will say that when I did do vaccine research, when I was, um, pregnant, and when my child was first born, I was really horrified by what I found. And I understood, both left and right are pushing these, pharma has everybody in the back pocket. And I don't know why that's so hard for people to understand. That's just, it's a simple reality. And I know it's hard to understand, but we have to grow up now. And we have to, because it's become, a life or death situation. We have to be able to look at what's happening and begin to say, okay, well, these people are tied to these interests. These interests are invested in themselves and making money. And I was really particularly horrified by the Democratic establishment, because they really are the ones that are pushing these mandates. And I just could no longer, that alone, I could no longer um, align myself in any way. So I really left that party. And the way that I feel about politics now is that I will vote for anyone who upholds freedom and sovereignty,
Hmm. Me
because I
too.
feel like that is the most important thing right now. And, it could be all leading to the same crumbling of our world, but at least if there are some measures in place that respect our Constitution, which is, really be under attack right now, that can kind of act as a dam to stop the flood of what we see politically happening. And unfortunately, what I've seen now personally over and over again is that the left is really, it's been absolutely horrifying to me to watch the fascism in the left rise. And I see it as, as people unwilling to question authority, which, that used to be par for the course for the classical liberal, and the classical liberal, really, we felt freedom was an important thing, sovereignty, the Constitution, all of these things. So it's been really shocking for me, and I'm not alone. I mean, I think there's been mass swaths of people that have left the democratic establishment. In leaving the left, I will say I have experienced such hatred, such vehemence, such backlash. It's people making, assumptions of, my political stance, oh, that I'm a brainwashed QAnon. It's fascinating, actually, when in fact what I see is that this is essentially a spell that's been cast upon many people. The left is the first in line, and it's very
Yeah,
sad. The
yeah.
first in line for the propaganda. They will listen and, and um, be the first to defend the government and
And corporations
corporations, which is intertwined with the corporations. It's really,
and war.
and war. That has been unbelievable to watch. So it's like the war, the whole sort of uh, the taking away of free speech and the pro censorship, the mandating. You can no longer decide what goes into your body. You have no sovereignty. It's all for the state. It's very scary.
Hmm.
Very scary.
And whether it comes from the left or the right, whoever is intolerant of even another view being raised
Yeah.
or other facts coming forward
Yes.
or another perception of reality or another experience being shared,
Yeah.
we all have to be able to come to the table. And I think that comes back to the Divine Mother and the love. And I think what is happening, I think what's happening is perhaps there is a divide that's happening that is so great that at some point it just can't sustain itself, because ultimately love is who we are. Love is the power. And that, I mean, I've seen this happen in families that were divided, in the COVID years, and some are still very divided, and others have come together in spite of all of that. And I think that having to reach across the aisle, having to reach out to anyone who has a different experience of reality, a different view, different everything, and not to annihilate them with ad hominem, calling them something and not being willing to listen because I've already negated you as a person because you're in that group. That's like racism, and which we're all against. So it's no different than racism if you're going to assume that you're in a certain group and that whole group is bad. So anybody who's willing to open up their arms, open up their hearts, and reach out and be loving, bless everybody, find ways to connect. To me, that's what I have hope for. Why don't we pivot to that? What do you have hope for? How do you see this all playing out? And what do you imagine, and where's your hope?
Hmm. I think that this is going to be a longer game, and
Hmm.
that there really is a breakage. I do think that is true. There is a schism, a divide, and I don't know in this form. I'm curious and interested to watch and to see. I don't know in this current form and state that we're in if that divide can be breached now. I'm not saying that it can't ever,
Hmm. Hmm.
but that I do feel that there's such a schism and people have so demonized each other. And so it will be interesting to see. I feel that the hope is really in our continued return to ourselves, and in each of us taking deeper responsibility and sovereignty over our own experiences, and really doing the deeper shadow work that is necessary to digest what's occurring in our individual worlds, and then to begin to be able to understand what's occurring externally. And I feel that that is a natural process, a natural human process, and I believe in the human spirit. But I also feel that it's a long game and it's going to take a lot of time. And I think, given where we are now and what we're watching is so challenging. There's so much horror, there's so much death, and that I think that we're going to be going through this, honestly, for a little while. And that for those, for all of us, but those of us who want to, not right or left, but want to root deeper in this time, the rooting is in our own hearts. And I think that that is a natural process that happens through suffering. Actually, suffering is a great um, transmuter, and it just takes time. So it's like everyone is on their own course and their own path, and that um, at some point, I think for each of us, the suffering becomes so great that then we come into the realization that the only way to go to resolve this suffering is to move into the stream, the divine stream. It's to move back into the wisdom lineages that we are born out of, that are actually held within our bodies, that we have all capability to plug into when we slow down, when we listen, and when we feel, when we take the time to feel. And this whole culture is about taking us out of ourselves, out of our experience, out of our intuition, out of our sensation, out of our bodies, And I do believe that it is an intentional extraction, that they are pulling people out of body, and that people are adrift. And it is a horror to watch. I mean, it's just, and it is a horror.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
And of course, we know some people don't see any of it at all. And I know if we were to make the analogy of like the Matrix, the movies, I mean, I have friends who would rather be in the Matrix than out of the Matrix, because the realization of being out of the Matrix is so difficult, so
yeah,
challenging. There's horror in that as well. There's horror in that, and
that's
so
the suffering, though, is that I think
yes,
people are
yeah.
so desperately trying to escape their suffering, and and that once you hit the rock bottom, and I think that this happens also. I mean, I happen to believe that we don't only live once, that we're a soul traveling through. So, in my perspective, and it may not be yours, or doesn't have to be anyone else's, but this is a longer journey for each of us, and that rock bottom. I mean, I think that people can stay in the matrix, whatever you want to call it, in the rock bottom, or right below, because when you're in the matrix, you're right at almost at the rock bottom, because you are trapped in a mind state that is keeping you afloat over the absolute horror that's right underneath it. And if you were to break through that that layer, you would hit into that enormous grief, that enormous suffering, and sort of like almost sort of a disbelief of this is what this is what this world is right here, right now. This world, has been sort of manipulated for our view, and this is not the only world that exists. We have to begin to go down into that suffering and then personally desire to ascend and to
Hmm.
say, I know that I feel there is something greater than this hell realm because that's the hell realm.
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking, bringing in the 23rd Psalm, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. You are my rod and my staff. You comfort me. That's the journey. I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, the deepest, darkest, most horrific places in consciousness, and I do not fear because I am anchored in the divine. And I think that's where our hope is. And I agree with you. It's a long game. It's a long game. It's not something that we're going to solve in the next few minutes or months or years. I want to wrap up. I want to give you a couple minutes to share. I know you've just created some beautiful embodiment video. I know that you provide some embodiment education, I think, for people. I just want to give you a couple minutes
Thank you.
to share, what you're offering.
Thank you. Well, I just want to respond quickly to the prayer. I mean, what a powerful, powerful prayer for leading us out of such darkness. And
Hmm.
I just want to say that it also is in these darkest hours, really, the Kali Yuga, whatever you want to call it, that the light is so clear. And that when one really opens the eyes and says, okay, I see what's going on now, and I am obliterated, then we call for help, for that connection, that plug in, and we work to get to ascend that
Hmm.
that ladder, to get out, because we can each do that. I love that prayer. Thank you. So yeah, I'm excited that I just finished editing a practice I call movement medicine, which is something I've been teaching for a very long time, and it's just a conglomeration of different practices, of embodiment practices. I pull from somatic exploration and my dance training. I pull from Ayurveda and yoga, the languaging. I pull from developmental movement, and I kind of combine these different experiences into a joyous expression of movement where we can use movement as a healing sort of tool, and we can tap into that divine presence that is pulsing through our veins. And so I just finally edited my movement medicine practice, which we shot over a year ago, and I move very slowly these days. I'm really excited to share that, and I think I'll make that available on Vimeo. And then I took a good bit of time off this summer. I am a mother to a young child, so I was with him largely this summer, and then I'll start back teaching in the fall, in September. And I teach 1 to 2 times a week the movement medicine and a yoga and somatic alchemy practice, and that I teach through my Patreon
And is
membership.
that something people have to be present for, or is it something they can do online with you?
Yes, it's an online membership where I teach 1 to 2 times a week, depending, about 4 or 5 times a month. And
Okay.
and they're Zoom classes, and then many of the people actually don't attend the class, and then I just send them the class.
The recordings.
So
Okay.
yeah, so people can practice anywhere at any time. So those are two ways
Okay.
to connect with the work that I've been doing.
Great. Well, we'll make sure I have those links to your Vimeo if that's available for public consumption, and also your courses and everything else that you're up to. And I'll probably have you back on a year from now, and we'll go, how have things changed? How have things changed?
How are we doing?
we'll, we'll see where things are going. Thank you, Murray, so much for being with me and for speaking so candidly. I know it's very hard in this world to be expressing what's not the mainstream view, but I think that we've learned a lot about, being untethered or being adrift, and the anchor that, we're the anchor of our own God center and intuition and all. I think you've given people a lot of food for thought there. So I really appreciate your being with me today.
Thank you so much for having me again. I really appreciate these conversations and having the opportunity to speak, my heart and mind and share in sort of an evolving dialogue around our current time. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, listeners, for hanging in there. And I know you've been blessed by this conversation. And I now close the spiritual forum.